Wednesday. And you know what? Today, I love the fact that we're starting to really get concrete on what we're going to talk about and kind of what we're going to discuss and how it relates to you, your sales, and your next level performance. And today we're going to talk about one of the first major shifts in the industry, which is construction season. To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly. You know, I look at this. So, do you guys remember Eddie Murphy on Saturday Night Live?
Yeah.
When he used to do Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, and I look at it's a beautiful day in my neighborhood, and for you guys being here, it's another beautiful day in my neighborhood. So, thank you to both of you for being here. And you know, today, Dean, Data Day Wednesday is got to be my favorite day of the week because, as we were just talking off air here before we went live for everyone. I mean, we were engulfed in a major conversation, and you know, I think we could probably do an entire day sprint, 8 hours of just talking about this stuff. It's so awesome. And today, what we want to talk about is every week we're going to really try and bring you. I mean, not necessarily a conversation about capacity and what rates are rising, but what's on the horizon. Because as a professional sales rep, right, our mission, our job, is to keep our customers ahead of the change curves, ahead of the challenges, ahead, so we can be proactive in making decisions that can maybe mitigate cost, maybe streamline some things, help, all that kind of stuff. Now, there's no doubt the market's, you know, kind of fractured. There's major issues going on in the market. So we're going to try and stay away from those, but we are going to bring things like what we're going to talk about today. You know, the construction industry. Where are the products coming out of? What does that mean for equipment? What does that mean for shippers this year if they don't have the equipment? How are they going to adjust and maybe use different equipment? You know, stuff that used to go on flatbeds, maybe they're going to figure out a way to put it on dry vans. I remember when we hit that crunch in 2018, one of my largest customers came to me and said, we got to figure out a different way. Because, I mean, we were spending $18,000, $16,000 to $18,000 on a stock transfer twice a month. Right. So we're talking $32,000 to like $34,000 a month just transferring stock. So if you think about that, there was about 106 slabs of quartz on a truck for $18,000. So you look at that price hike versus margins, which is what we're all facing today. What is the cost? What is the margin? Where are we? Are we going to be profitable? You know, we've talked to many, many customers say the number one thing for 2022 is profitability. I got to be profitable. And how does this impact? So we're gonna jump into it. We're gonna jump into construction industry. You know, the steel, the concrete, the motor, the gravel, everything. We're gonna get to as much as we can today because a half hour goes real quick with the mad scientist Data Dean.
Real fast. Good morning, everybody. Hey, shout out to everybody.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, Jeff. Good morning, gents. Dean, the data machine. Oh, I like that.
I kind of like that name too. Dang.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
My head hurts.
Good morning. And then hated good morning, Vietnam. Little Robin Williams action for a Wednesday morning. Love it. So, Dean.
Well,
what's the big area we want to talk about that's going to kind of have the largest impact on the upcoming construction season? Because we got infrastructure bills going through. We got all sorts of stuff happening.
Yeah. I mean, let's start off with welcome to pothole season. Right? Get ready to get wrecked. It's the thaw, and this leads into our talk about construction because the ground is thawing. The roads are loosening up as the rain water, washes away all of the repair work. So seriously, it is pothole season. Be very careful out there. There's some big ones, especially on the George Washington Bridge.
Especially in Ohio. Watch out when you come to Ohio.
Yeah. Ohio, DJ's got some of the highest number of structurally deficient bridges in the country. Some of the worst ones are in West Virginia, but Ohio's got a lot, as you no doubt know. But why I mentioned pothole season, people are starting to dig holes. The ground thaws, everything warms up. You see, we're in that phase. Steel production peaks in February each year. Building and construction sort of get going in March. Single-family home building starts. So we kind of move out of that winter freeze and we start to thaw out. and we typically see flatbed demand start to take off this time of the year. So spot rates are rising in flatbed, falling in dry van and reefer. So capacity is starting to tighten in flatbed, as it does every single year at this time. And we're seeing a little bit more drilling activity, not a lot for drill pipe and casing in the Permian Basin and up around Cushing, Oklahoma. Not a lot of volumes there. They could certainly do with some more production, as we talked about at the start of the show. But this is the time of the year when all of the big retailers position all of their inventory for you and I to go out and buy stuff in the spring, whether it be a 100 horsepower tractor, a lawnmower, anything that you think you might need for spring. They are putting it in warehouses right now at Lowe's and Home Depot. So that's what's going on now. And that drives a lot of demand for not just flatbed, but dry vans. So one of the markets that I had a look at in advance of the show, knowing that we were going to talk about this, was the Gary, Indiana market. Not a big market. If you've driven through Gary, Indiana, you can go through it really quickly. It's not a big market, just around the bottom of, is it Lake Michigan? Lake Michigan. Once you head out of Chicago and head towards, head east. Gary, Indiana is the leading producer of raw steel in the country. About 30% of all raw steel is made there. They've got more than half of the nation's blast furnace capacity. So if you think about a freight market, this is a really small freight market that pushes out an enormous amount of flatbed steel, not just truck, but also rail. Steel production this January just gone, based on the Fred database, up about 2% compared to this time last year. So,
what does that mean from a volume perspective?
Gosh, I could do it was domestic production was 1.7 million tons last week. So while I'm talking, if someone wants to divide 1.762 million tons by 25 tons, that'll tell you how many truckloads that is. 1.7620000 divide 25 tons. Say they're probably going to load 30 tons, but
divided by 25.
Do it by 30 tons. Let's just say you've got a really light flatbed spec.
So it's 58,733.33.
Yeah, so it's equivalent truckloads. Not all of that will go on truck, of course, but it's a lot of freight coming out of a small freight market. And that's why, so for carriers, there's not a lot of inbound freight to that particular market. So you've got to get there. There's some deadhead miles. So you're going to price out of that market to reflect the deadhead miles in there. Steel production generally, we're up to about 80, just under 80% at capacity utilization of our furnaces, which is great news. We were down in the low 60s, maybe 50s during the pandemic. So the steel industry's made a comeback. This is the busy time of the year. People are starting to get ready for construction and ordering a lot of steel. So steel's a big market. I had a look at some rates for you. In terms of spot market activity, and I don't have contract data to share with you, but February, if I look at spot market loads, these are loads moved. They went from 32,000 at the start of February to 51,000 at the end of February. So quite a significant
just from that
increase.
Gary, Indiana area.
Just from Gary, Indiana, right? Wow. So a lot of volume. It goes to, some of it goes to a nearby Indiana, where all the large trailer manufacturers are. Omaha is another surprising market. There's a lot of volume goes to Omaha, Nebraska, out of Gary, Indiana, and I have no idea why, but there's something going on out there. If I look at that particular lane, we can dive into the rates. This is an interesting one because it's what you'd call a backhaul market. So if you're going to go into Omaha, Nebraska with a flatbed, where are you going to come back out of? What are you going to load back out of there? Because you're kind of in the beef patch, right? Beef and grain. If you haven't got a reefer out of there, what are you going to do with a flatbed? You may have to deadhead quite a few miles. So that's why you're seeing really high rates of $4.76 a mile. So $4.76 a mile to Omaha. It's 481 miles, so you could do an unload reload same day if you don't mess around. Although flatbeds do take a little bit longer to unload. If you've got a good forklift driver or crane, you could do a turn each day. But in terms of where those rates have been, they've been climbing since July last year into that particular market. They peaked last May at about 487. So it looks like there's something seasonally goes on that peaks in May each year in Omaha, Nebraska. That could just be coinciding with building and construction. So that's one market to watch. The other one I watch a lot out of Gary is what I call the steel lane, which is Gary to Pittsburgh. It's 432 miles, same distance as Omaha. Again, a lot of flatbed volume comes out of Pittsburgh. Like, it's an enormous market for flatbed. It's $4.40. So it's $4.40 a mile. These are line haul rates, folks, excluding fuel. So $4.40 is a 12-month high. So it's the highest it's
excluding
been.
fuel, and that's the anomaly that is obviously taking over all the news. Taking
with
everything
fuel,
over is what the hell that's going to do there.
With fuel, it's $5. Right. So with fuel, it's $5. The highest it ever was last year was $4.54. That's the highest it was last year. So I think the point here is that flatbed capacity is tight on a lot of lanes, in particular where there's imbalance. So if you're thinking about capacity, it's not just the transaction of a one-way load. Let's get a load moved, between the broker and the carrier. The carrier is always thinking, what am I going to do when I get there? How long is it going to take to unload? How many deadhead miles have I got? Where's my next load? And that's why I always say to people in the non-asset space, always talk to carriers about what's next, because I'm likely to agree to a lower rate into Omaha if you've already got a decent load booked out for me, because it's not so much the rate per mile, it's the time I spend. It's the opportunity cost of doing nothing.
Yep.
So if my opportunity cost is I lose a day, there's $1,300 revenue gone. Mm-hmm. I can never get back. So,
and as a sales rep, if you work in an office that's got multiple sales reps, I would suggest sending an email to them or having a meeting with them saying, hey guys, how can we, help all of us streamline our numbers, get better service, and utilize our suppliers. And even if you're an agent, I don't think agents talk to other agents enough and say, how can we do it? I got freight going here. Do you have freight? Oh, you got freight coming out of there. Okay. When do you have it? And then you start strategically placing those chess pieces in an area where you can get checkmate every single time. We got a bunch of. I
tried to do that with some guys in my office. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
And a lot of them hold it so close to their chest. They're like, no, I don't want.
But when it works, crazy. It's amazing.
So Dean says, I got a flatbed customer there. Or Jeff says, I got a flatbed customer. Give me some good news, Dean. So I don't think he gave you the news you wanted, Jeff. But
sorry.
Ryan says, I feel like steel and lumber product will continue to sit on houses just because in a normal market, it's cheaper. It's a cheaper commodity to run.
Yeah, I agree.
Plus,
I agree, Ryan.
They're still finding it difficult with labor and supplies, right? So in the building industry, they're still finding delays to get homes built. I think building permits are up, but I think the actual construction phase is going to be elongated. It's going to take longer to get stuff built over the course of the year.
So what does it say going into Hastings, Dean? Jeff goes into Hastings from his flatbed customer. Do you have any data on Hastings you might be able to share with him so he can
from where to where? Hastings to
it goes. So he goes from Gary, Indiana, because he said he had a customer. So Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said you had a flatbed customer there. Indiana. So I'm thinking Gary, Indiana to Hastings.
Yeah.
Good morning, Kenneth.
Yeah, okay.
Welcome, my friend.
Good morning, Kenneth.
Similar trend. So what's interesting there is for Jeff, rates are only 5 cents a mile lower than the high last year. So they're already at 463 line haul. They peaked at 469 this time last year. So if I have a look at the load balance out of Omaha, because I look at outbound, inbound load balance. If I go to Omaha, load volumes are down 8% week over week. So they were climbing all the way through February. They almost doubled in February into Omaha, Nebraska. That's on the flatbed side, but now they're starting to cool off. So I would say that looks like that's positioning of a lot of freight into that market in readiness for spring is what that looks like.
That's
right.
Those rates, I was thinking the same thing. They tried to rush and get stuff moved into that area.
Yeah. Maybe. Yep. So I think flatbed capacity is going to be tough for a lot of people this year. It looks eerily similar to 2018. In fact, if you look at the shape of the curves, 2018 and this year and last year are almost identical in terms of load volumes and spot rates. So I think even though capacity's been loosening in dry van and reefer, I think flatbeds, it's just going to be another terrific year for flatbed carriers. What that means for those that are buying capacity, it'll be pretty tight, and you'll be paying a premium to get flatbed carriers in position.
So now would be the time to go to your customer, share the data that you're learning today, and say, like, listen, what are your volumes? What are you thinking? Let's get people in place now.
That's an important discussion, but. So, a lot of flatbed freight is project freight, notwithstanding roofing shingles from a plant to Home Depot, right? A lot of that's contract freight, but a lot of spot freight in the flatbed market is project one-off freight into a market that's a long way from anywhere, where they're building a factory or a warehouse, right? So for flatbed carriers, it means uncertainty when they get there, a lot of empty miles to get out of there. But the biggest thing that I think, if you said, what's the one thing you could work with customers on to get flatbed capacity, how long it takes to get them loaded and unloaded. That is the number one thing you've got to work on. It's no good trying to negotiate a great rate or a cheap rate if that carrier is going to sit there all day trying to get unloaded with a crane. And it is just, it takes forever to get flatbeds unloaded. It's just a frustrating experience. So to me, that would be the most important part. The challenge is sometimes that's a third party that's not connected to your customer. So that's where you've really got to watch.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, Dean. I did a lot of that down in Texas. I had a customer down there, and it's the timing of everything is the crucial part.
But would you guys not think at this point, with everything that's happened with companies, I mean, like even now, I went to get a 2023 snowmobile, and literally within like an hour they were sold out. Right. Like an hour, and I'm online, and I'm like, when you're hitting refresh consistently, and for everyone that's in construction, would you not think there'd be like a rush to get to the head of the line, and companies that are producing steel? And again, I'm asking, would you not think they would have a better idea of what's happening when, because the raw materials are so tight? They got to know exactly what's going. Like I was talking to, when I was building my sled deck, I was talking to the steel people up in a town near me.
Right.
And I said, like, how much steel do you have? And they said, we have 8 lengths left. So they're 24 lengths of the steel I was looking for. So they had 8 24-foot lengths. And I said, okay, well, I'll take this. She said, okay, do me a favor. Go and measure exactly what you need. And she said, I will actually cut it for you for free, because we actually don't want to sell you more than you actually need. And I said, really? She says, no, we're that tight. She goes, so like take every single piece you need, measure it to the 1/8 of an inch. We will cut it, come and pick it all up. She goes, I'll give it to you as like a kit, as opposed to you cutting it. And for me, I'm like, perfect. Because like, what am I going to do with a chunk of steel this big, right? You're typically not going to do, and it's a waste when you're paying by the foot. So I would see the other companies, I mean, maybe not to that extent, but if they're so tight on that raw material, would you not think, or would it not be maybe a valid conversation as a salesperson to have to say, okay, what's your lineup? Where are you planning? Because I understand it's project work, but and again, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, but I would think if you haven't ordered your steel now, you're not getting it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the overall trend is that, I read this on Seeking Alpha, and our own Professor Kaplis has been talking about this, but companies have been intentionally over-ordering just to make sure the amount of goods got through all of the various transportation bottlenecks. Sense. That's been one of the big trends. So I suspect we'll go through some shortages, I think, of certain materials for sure. I'm expecting, though, an inventory build where it may go the other way. We're on the precipice of a global energy shock right now. This is sort of an evolving story. Even as we talk, there are changes in the oil market that could completely upset a lot of industries. We've already got shortages of all sorts, record prices of things like grain, nickel, oil, obviously. So this could be one of those events where inflation actually, crushes consumer demand. And then the market goes the other way really quickly, because people talk about recession that comes out of high periods of inflation. Who knows? We're 2 years, I think today or tomorrow, Friday is the 2-year anniversary of the WHO declaring a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
March 11. So we're 2 years into this, and we've still got a market that's upset. We're all saying, wow, finally that's over and we can get rid of our masks. Well, now we've got a war in Ukraine, and now we've got a global energy crisis emerging. Like, it's one thing after the another. And that's why I think it's hard to say where this is going to go. But I think the labour market is certainly easing. Builders should be able to buy, get more people in the labour force to build more homes. But as the head of Occidental Petroleum said yesterday at Sarah in Houston, they said that the challenges they've got in terms of building more wells is labour shortages and raw materials. So even the drilling industry is having trouble getting supplies and people to help in that industry, which is normally a very robust industry. I think we're in for a year of more of the same, the way it's shaping up.
I have a friend who has a well down in Texas, and he's from Michigan. He had to move down to Texas to man as well because he doesn't have anybody to do it.
Right. Yeah, I did some work for Halliburton a few years ago as a contractor, and during the heyday, right, the fracking boom, and it was just the whole Texas market was just booming. It's hard to see it go back to those days because some of the wells aren't producing as much as they used to. But we're bringing a lot of oil in from Canada. I mean, that's a great thing. I can't imagine, as Ken said on our show yesterday, I'd imagine that property prices around Edmonton would be pretty attractive right now if you're selling, right? Because that's the oil patch.
That's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and there's a lot of work that's created when they go back to that.
Of course,
it's kind of like Edmonton and that whole Alberta area from all over. I mean, not only Alberta, Ontario.
Yeah,
I mean, I remember years ago when oil was booming out west. I knew probably 24 people that would go out to the oil fields for 6 months, work, come home, go out for 6 months, come home for a couple of weeks, go out for 4 months, work, come home.
Right.
I mean, it and it's huge bank for these guys. I mean, I remember one of my neighbors, his son, I think he was like 18 or 19. And the kid was banking like $190K a year just because he doesn't spend anything when he's out there.
Right.
He'd come back, he'd buy a motorcycle, he'd go back out. He'd come back, he'd buy a snowmobile, he'd go back out. He'd come back and buy all these toys. And then he finally stopped and he's like, I don't know why I bought them all. I'm never around to use them. You know what I mean? But it's like that all of that, because a lot of it is from sand, right? Like they're extracting the oil. So there's a lot more labor intensive to it. But
speaking of oil, I did see the governor. I'm sorry, Dean. I did see, though, the governor, somebody from Alaska, was on, and they're really trying to have a big push to do more out of Alaska as well.
They've got some oil up there that we could get hold of for sure. Yeah. I was just thinking about when I'd travel during the fracking boom, every single hotel I'd stay at, there'd be half a dozen pneumatic cement tankers out in the parking lot, or wireline trucks, or tankers, mud trucks. Like, that was sort of the feature of the fracking boom. You don't see that anymore because those holes have been drilled. I don't know that we'll go back. I think we've got about 650 oil wells compared to the 2,000 we had a few years ago. So we're a long way from that sort of level of production. But I think the building industry, we're going to see, infrastructure project we haven't really talked about, or the infrastructure bill. We're going to see a lot of building and construction, period. Not just in residential
infrastructure bill. I remember you put out an article when it first got passed. So that infrastructure bill, I think I put it out to like 2.2 million truckloads or something based on the bill, or
like gravel, plate steel, sand, asphalt, all that stuff. It's a lot of freight to move.
A lot. And then you have also the fact that companies can't produce trucks and trailers and tractors fast enough for demand. Then you have, I mean, I think there's still a lack of new drivers coming into the industry, which I think in half a decade or a decade from now, if we don't get better at marketing to drivers and sharing with people how important truck driving is, professional truck driving, I think we're in for another real big slap in the face when that happens.
The nuance here, Dan, is I think there's going to be a lot more drivers available in the short haul, regional, construction, building, ag, dump market, right? Because people want to be home. That's the natural inclination.
Exactly.
I think for anybody out there that's in sales and you're talking about long haul capacity, as I've been saying for a year, this shift in driver demographics, where there's been so many drivers retire and leave the industry, newer drivers don't want to drive long distances and they don't want to be home. Long haul trucking is going to have very tight capacity for a long time to come, just by the nature of the job. So I think if you're thinking about capacity and your customers, you've got to really work differently with customers that have got long haul capacity. It's like flatbed capacity. It's not about the rate; it's about how long I sit under a crane. Right. And you can only push so much of it off the side with your foot, right? Which I've done, right? If you've got rolled bar, it's really easy to roll off. You just come in a little bit quicker under the.
Just kick it off, right?
Yeah, kick it off. I've done it.
So do you see maybe the shift going from long haul trucking to maybe intermediate and trailer swapping along the way?
Yeah, I think I think that fits the model of autonomous trucks too, right? So, I mean, electrification could be part of that. You could have electric, battery-powered trucks running out short haul, staging trailers in sort of spot yards, and then you've got a middle mile segment that's done by, maybe a semi-autonomous truck. I'm not a fan of driverless trucks. I think that's a huge mistake. I think you need somebody there, just like you need a pilot in a plane that can even land itself. But I think there's a model there where it changes the nature of long haul trucking. I mean, I've done a lot of trucking and fallen asleep at the wheel at 4 a.m. more times than I can remember because I have to be somewhere. And I think that's where driver assistance technology could be really good. Because I would love the truck to take over and drive for me for 20 minutes while I just sat there and relaxed.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm probably going to jump in the bunk because that's a lower risk than sitting there trying to stay awake, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, but I think that technology is coming, and that will make the job easier, but it'll make the job different. So you'll have different types of drivers doing different segments of the work. And I think we've talked about on the show, you'll have this transition of, get your license at 18, drive a dump truck, and then go and work for a large company and work over the road, and then find other successive jobs till you come back home with a better paying job. I think that'll change where you've got a lot more work that's available regionally for drivers. They'll be able to make pretty good money. And then in that longer haul segment, there'll be a whole different type of driver that'll be more tech savvy, someone that can work a laptop as well as sit there and steer a truck, because you've got to be able to troubleshoot and diagnose. I think that's how that model's going to evolve.
And then it'll also probably create a lot more construction on drop yards every 400 miles or whatever. 400 recharge, go back, or if you can do like, I look at it kind of like the hours of service in Canada allow you to go from Toronto to Montreal, unload, reload, and get back to Toronto before your shift's up, so you can go home for the night. Right. And I kind of look at that model as the future of freight, which means there's going to be
the turn.
the turn, the quick turns. But it's like, you can do it with a day cab. You don't need a sleeper cab, right? So there's all these different aspects of that particular move being 300. I think it's like 346 miles or something. And in that turn, especially if you're dropping trailer each end, it's just drop, swap, switch paperwork, and you're gone. If you're waiting 3-4 hours to unload and reload, you're screwing your time getting back. If somebody has a brain fart or passes gas the wrong way on the 401 coming through Kingston and stuff, you're screwed. You're there for hours. But it's that ideology of, short turns, get everybody home for the night. My neighbor is a truck driver. And, he's like, he goes, Dan, he'd work all night with Canada Post going to like London and all this kind of stuff. And now he actually, he went and got a job at Speedy, where he's doing runs. He's doing Toronto, Montreal runs. He's home every night. Now, don't get me wrong. He's home at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, but he's still home every night. He's still
home in his bed.
100%. And he says, Dan, he goes, I'm going to start leaving earlier. So I'm going to start leaving at 5 a.m. He goes, so I can be home a little early because we got drop trailers. And I mean, for those of you that don't understand Speed, like Speed is a big LTL carrier. So they have their facilities at each end. So the trailers are ready to go. Right. But that's going to create more quote unquote cross docks, warehouses, yards, that kind of thing in these trucks. Little segments all around. Right. Which then is going to increase construction, is going to it's kind of all, that same challenge to build that infrastructure.
Most of the freight in Australia is LTL in multi-deck, drop deck, curtain sided trailers where you've got mezzanine floors, so you actually max out the 50-foot trailer. But it's the vast majority is what we call changeover, which is a turn, right? Where you turn halfway. So a lot of the drivers that'll do 650 miles in a 12-hour shift, probably 14. They go halfway and turn around and go straight back, and that's day cab, right? So that model works really efficiently. What it does is it means you've got more handling of the freight, and you've got more P&D trucks running around doing local deliveries. But it's much safer for the drivers because they're no longer doing pickup and deliveries during the day and then trying to stay awake all night. That era of the 80s and 90s is kind of gone. So I think that'll come back. I'm not sure why companies don't do that now. From a driver's perspective, it's much harder. That's the hardest part is day cab, because you can't sleep. And you've got this pressure to be back at a certain time because the local delivery guys are sitting on the dock waiting for you to roll in after 12 hours at night. It's the hardest job I've ever done in my life is overnight express, doing a meet halfway. It's just brutal on the body. It's hard to sustain.
So actually, Jeff, I apologize, brother. I know I pushed this up there and then I missed it. Jeff was saying it's Gary, Indiana, and Chicago going to Hastings, Dean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll go through comments if you don't mind while you look that up. So Ryan says 100% all the customers I have in construction is project, no consistency unless it's a certainty or a hardy product, building products, 100%. Jeff says, Jeff reiterated what you said. You can't take the human aspect out of the mix. And I don't think you can.
Listen,
I mean,
obviously
even
AI technology,
autonomous cars, like you have to be sitting behind the driver's seat because it's a computer. It can glitch, right?
It's still technology.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. When I first got my car, so it's got not autonomous, but like a driver assist package where it's got like adaptive cruise control and lane keep. So my car will stay in between lanes and it'll do a cruise control. And don't get me wrong. I'll be the first to admit, when I first got it, I would be driving down the 410 on my way into the office and I would take my cell phone and I would turn like this and I would put my cell phone out the window as I'm approaching like a dead stop in traffic. And I would do it just to mess with the person behind me because you would see people like, oh my God, like they're bracing for me to have an accident. And that's probably really horrible to say because I'm like, I now that I say it out loud, that's really disgusting that I did that. But I know this is live. I can't take it back. It's not like I can edit that crap out. But I did that because I just kind of wanted to freak people out. And I'm thinking now that I say it, I'm like, geez, I almost got. Sorry, everyone that was behind me.
I got the data for Jeff while we got it here quickly,
the latest TikTok video like mayhem from there.
Jeff says doing podcasts. Jeff, I think we've said this before. I used to do my podcast in the car, Dean.
In the car.
And I was driving in a snowstorm and there's like cars spinning out behind me and I'm like, and the car's like doing one of these as I'm changing, when you get that snow in between the lanes and I'm doing my podcast and Jeff, that's when Jeff first connected with me. He goes, dude, I'm not trying to be an asshole here. He goes, but I don't think you're showing a good sign of responsibility and safety. He goes, like, you're in the middle of a snowstorm and you're doing this podcast, teaching people how to sell. And I was like, damn, you're right, brother. I'll let you share that data for Jeff.
This is a really interesting one. And this is something a lot of people don't think about, especially in the ELD era. But Chicago to Hastings for Jeff is at $4.33. So it's $4.33. excluding fuel. Now, the fuel surcharge is 57 cents a mile. So the all-in rate broker to carrier would be closer to $4.90. So you're almost at $5, which is a 12-month high. But I think the important point here is that it averages at about $4.30 a mile over the course of the last 14 months from Chicago to Omaha. And here's why it's a tough market for a carrier at 635 miles. Right now, you can. I've done 600 miles in a truck loaded. That's a hard thing to do and get unloaded and get reloaded to go again the next day. So 635 miles is what I call a tweener, where you can't do it in that day, but it's more likely a load. It's more like a load, reload over 2 days. And it could go longer. So it's one of the, if you get around 450, 500 miles, you can unload, reload and go again. If you start to get into that, 500 to 1,000 mile range, that's when you can't, unless you've got a team, right? You can't get it done that day. So it's about utilization levels. And I think that's why rates into Omaha are probably loaded a little bit, is because you can't do it in a day. It's, you're getting unloaded and reloaded in a day and a half. I think and then you've got the crane delay and the forklift on the other side. So
and teams for like anything under 1,000, anything under 1,600 to 2,000 miles for a team is almost not even interesting. I remember when I used to do a ton of pharmaceuticals, there was 356 mile lanes. 356 miles, team drivers. I'm like, why? Yeah. They said, we want team drivers. Everything we do is teams. I would literally send a truck from one location and have them run the day before to get there to come back to make it worthwhile. So we got Kenneth says technology is one thing, but drivers aren't even trained to drive manual trucks.
Heck, they don't even give them CB radios.
Yeah, they don't even have CBs anymore. I don't get that.
I don't. It's nuts. We always sort of jump on the center lane gang. The center lane guys that sit there and don't look in their mirrors. They're even taught to not change lanes. They're taught to be in the center lane. Apparently it's safer. So here's the thing: if you're in the center lane, you've doubled the chance of being hit from either side. If you're in the granny lane, you've only got one lane to worry about.
Did you call it the granny lane?
Granny lane.
I love that.
I love that. So it's the hammer lane, granny lane, and middle lane.
Granny lane is I'm calling it that from now on. I love it.
I'm in the granny lane all the time. I'm in the granny lane all the time, but I'm generally passing all the guys in the center lane because they won't move over, and you've got no CB, and you can't say, "Hey, dude, I want to come past." Now, people say, "Well, but you're speeding." Well, you can do 75 in 13 states. You can do 70 in 16 states. But if you're speed limited at 62, get out of the way. We've got stuff to do. We've got places to go.
I remember when I lived in Quebec, the worst thing I hated was Ontario drivers because they sit in the hammer lane at 100 kilometers.
Yeah, that's not good.
No,
140 at least.
I mean, growing up, I was like, oh my God, another Ontario plate. And I live in Ontario now, so all you Ontario people out there, don't hate on me, but I live in Ontario now. I'm sorry. But y'all hang out in the hammer lane, move.
Yeah.
Trust me, I drive a 60cc electric car. Like, I don't have a Roadster. You know what I mean? I'm not driving a Tesla Roadster here, people. I put the hammer down and I'm 0 to 60 in like 14.7 seconds. Okay. So I'm not talking about a Roadster, but you will very rarely see me in the hammer lane unless I'm going with traffic, and then I'm over. I'm over. And so I'm sorry. Get out of the way.
You're going to stay in the granny lane.
Yeah, I'm in the granny lane for sure.
You'll have plenty of company.
What do we have to bring us out of here today?
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Hey, thank you guys. Dean, as always, thank you for joining us. Wednesdays can't be any more fun than it is with you.
Yeah, I hope everyone listening got something from today, and I hope it was helpful in whatever you're doing or whatever your next steps are.
Even if you just got the granny lane. You know the granny lane now.
It's important.
But again, like and subscribe down below. Our Sales Chatter Live. We are live daily, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. till 9:30 Eastern Standard Time. Start your day right with us. And Dean disappeared. Not really sure what happened, but we'll get that back. Quote to take us out. I think this is great. I feel like I had this planned because data days, especially with the landscape of the world today, seem so uncertain. And so I thought this was a great quote for today. So not once does the Bible say worry about it, stress over it, or figure it out. But over and over it clearly says trust God. Just trust God. It'll all work out, guys. I promise.
Love that. Love that. To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations,